discusses the importance of mediation when tackling bullying. And Vick Hope talks about how going through tough times ended up inspiring her activism. Hi Liam, it's great to have you on this episode of The Exchange where we're discussing bullying. First of all, can I just ask you to give us a simple definition of what bullying is?
Yeah, of course. So bullying is a repetition of a behavior or something that's done to upset another person. It can manifest in so many different ways. It can be insults and abuse. It can be physical. It can be online. There's so many different platforms and ways in which somebody could bully another person.
Obviously, no one is born a bully. What are some of the reasons that somebody might bully another person?
It's a really interesting question. And it's something that we've been really passionate about at Ditch the Label. We know from our research that people who bully can do for a variety of reasons. We know that overwhelmingly there's a lot of stress, there's traumatic situations in their life. We know that they quite often struggle with their mental health and the feelings that they have about themselves and their self-esteem. But generally, what we do know is there is always a root issue. And the reason somebody is being bullied is never because of them or the thing that makes them different.
Vick, it is lovely to have you on this episode of The Exchange to talk about bullying. I read recently that you were so determined to study at Cambridge, tell me if I'm wrong, but that you taught yourself further maths at A-level and then also went to evening classes to learn Spanish. Yeah. Where did that drive come from? That's just amazing.
I don't know. So, you know what? I love languages so much and I love speaking them. I love French and I really wanted to learn Spanish for a long time, but my school didn't do it. It wasn't a subject on offer. And I campaigned for it. And it did happen, but the year after I left. So that was never an option for me. But in order to go and study it at uni, and I'm going to need an A-level in it if I'm going to get into this amazing university. Because for whatever reason, I was very determined. I guess above all, I knew that this was an establishment where I was going to have my mind really nurtured and I was going to learn so much. And that's such an exciting prospect to me. I love learning. At school, you know what? My favorite year was GCSEs because you have such breadth of subject matter. And I want to learn as much as possible. And just the opportunity to be learning new things all the time is the spice of life.
Can you tell me a bit about your school experience and whether you ever experienced any bullying?
Not in a way that I would have come home and said I'm being bullied, but I think that's the way that young people compartmentalize a lot of things that happen to them. Because for sure, now I look back, there was times when I was told that I was ugly, that my hair was weird, that I wasn't allowed to play with other girls because I had different hair. And there was times at gymnastics where I was told that my family looked weird and that it wasn't right. And I remember when I was growing up, a lot of people would ask me questions that I guess we'd now know to be unacceptable, like how is it that I've got to be this colour, or have you been left out in the sun too long, or I remember when I was younger asking my mum to wash the brown off me when I was in the bath because I thought it was so ugly, because I didn't know anyone else who looked like that. I didn't know any other mixed race people. I guess that's bullying. I never saw it like that, but that's maybe because we try and we're very resilient. You can go for a lot more than we think we can, but that doesn't mean we should. You know, I guess it's hard to be what you can't see, isn't it? And if you don't know anyone else who looks like you, think you're different, you think there's something wrong with you. And I certainly thought there was something wrong with me. I thought my hair was horrible because people used to touch it like it was like you're a novelty, like you're an animal, you know, like you're a pet. And they're kind of doing it in an endearing way, but it's sort of dehumanizing, isn't it? And I guess when you get used to that sort of thing, as well as like the little microaggressions that I think go with being a brown woman, a brown girl, that you're sassy or feisty, or a lot of these things, they kind of eat away at you to the point where you start to believe it yourself a little bit. Luckily for me, I had a really great friendship group, and actually I went to a school where it wasn't tolerated, and if any teacher caught wind of anyone saying anything like that to anyone else, it would get stamped out, and then we'd be sat down and told why it was wrong. And I think that's testament to good teaching, is properly explaining that the ways in which we're different are not negative things. It's very positive that we're all different. It's what makes us unique, and it's what makes us powerful, and what makes us special and beautiful. And understanding that's really important for young people, and that can often be the cause, the root of bullying is not accepting our differences.
Most people I know, to be honest, have experienced bullying at some point in their lives, and it seems very common. What should somebody do if they are being bullied?
I think first and foremost, it's always important to talk to somebody, whether that's a trusted adult or a friend or somebody at Ditch the Label. I think talking to somebody is always important because not only does it provide you with support, but it also documents everything that's going on. There's a lot of research actually to show that confronting the person who's bullying you, if you feel safe to do so, in a non-confrontational, calm way, it's actually called mediation, can be a really great tool and way of resolving the situation. And I think fundamentally it is always important to recognize that the reason you're being bullied is not because of you. It is because the person who is perpetrating has their own issues that they're not dealing with in a healthy or correct way.
It's really interesting what you said about mediation. Can you give an example of the sort of thing that you might say to somebody who's perhaps thrown an insult your way?
It's a great question. I think firstly, it's always really important that you go into it when you're calm. I think having a bit of a kind of a notepad with bullet points and some of the things that you want to say written before the session is always really important. I think both sides need to be willing to have the conversation, and I think it always works well when it's in a neutral environment. So not at somebody's house, for example, which could create an imbalance of power. Quite often it's good and helpful to have a mediator who is unbiased and can help diffuse the situation if it does get quite heated, which sometimes it can. And I think it's always really important to try and avoid using like inflammatory language or use it as an opportunity to point the finger or to shift blame. I think there's definitely a tactic, but I would highly recommend trying mediation to those who are in difficult situations. So I would recommend checking out the Ditch the Label resource before you do it. Also, don't do it if you don't feel safe doing so, or if you feel that it could jeopardize your safety.
So it's interesting to know that speaking out against these things can in some situations be the right thing to do, because I think sometimes it feels much easier to say nothing and to do nothing, and often I think you feel like you are silenced in the situation. What's the importance of speaking to somebody when this happens?
It can revolutionize your situation. And you know, talking from experience, I was bullied for 10 years at school, and I just became very quiet and didn't ever confront the people who were making my life a misery until kind of towards the end of that 10 years where I tried mediation, and actually it was so empowering. It gave me a level of autonomy over my own situation, you know, and research and evidence does show that talking about it really does help you deal with the situation. The Ditch the Label support community, for example, is just full of people talking about their own experiences and sharing advice, which I think is really important. You know, many people have been through the situation of bullying and have some really fantastic advice and tips.
How did that experience of, I suppose, pushing on through when you had this ambition and drive, and you're experiencing perhaps a place at a time that lacked that representation and that diversity, how's that then gone on to inform your activism now, would you say?
So I think a part of being made fun of for being driven and studious made me want to go even more to Cambridge, because I thought, well, then I won't be different there. I'm assuming everyone else there is going to be ambitious and studious. They were, spoiler alert, really way more than me. And I'll be honest, what I probably felt my lowest in terms of like where my mind fitted in when I got there, and I felt stupid. I felt so stupid and so underprepared, and they were just so confident, and it was that confidence that really threw me. But then what I realized, and I think this is exactly what you say, this is a kind of informed my activism to an extent. Where a lot of what I want and what I fight for is inclusivity and equality, and wanting kids from especially disadvantaged backgrounds to know that they can belong in a setup where perhaps they have felt locked out or disenfranchised socially or culturally. And also, you want to fight for a system where they're not locked out, you know, because it happens right at the beginning, at the very beginning, when a little black kid is called naughty for doing something that is just playful, whereas a little white kid might be called playful for it. You see it happen, and it really has a knock-on effect. So trying to change that, I think stems from that place.
end of bullying can have a big effect on your mental health. What can you do to make sure your mental health is a priority as you're tackling that situation head on?
I think you always need to talk about it. I think working to find a solution to your situation is really important, but also bullying does create emotions in us, and it is really important that you deal with those emotions in healthy ways. So for example, if it's creating a lot of anger in you, we know that that releases a hormone called cortisol, which then triggers a fight or flight response. The problem is, this is kind of something we developed when we lived in caves, and that response was designed to remove us from danger. If you were being chased by a tiger, for example, you just couldn't really imagine that happening in 2020. But it has been a wild year, so you just never know. But it is always really important to deal with those emotions, and with anger especially, it usually does require quite an active response, which is why doctors always talk about exercise. They talk about doing something really physical to get rid of that cortisol from your body. With sadness, it generally is a little bit of a less active thing, but it is important that you connect with that sadness and you cry, or you meditate, or keep a journal. You need to express these emotions and release them from your body, because if you don't, what will happen over a period of time is, I always kind of say, we all have an emotional bucket, and whenever something bad happens, it does fill that bucket up. And what you don't want to happen is to be at a point where your bucket is full and you just kind of explode.
Obviously, you started Ditch the Label, this charity that is really there to support young people who are going through bullying and prejudice. For people watching, how can Ditch the Label help them?
So there's a number of different ways. Firstly, we have hundreds of really great support guides and resources and thousands of tips on our website. We also have an online support community where people can speak to our trained mentors and the wider community confidentially. We also have some really great content that we put out on our social media channels, and we recently just launched new curriculum and resources for schools, which are freely accessible to every educator.
And obviously recently you've become a presenter on Radio 1's Life Hacks, which I love, by the way. It's a great show. What made you want to get into this work, and how do you think shows like this can bring support to people who are going through difficult times?
Well, I used to listen to it back in the day when it used to be called the Sunday Surgery, and it was such an important show then, and it's such an important show now. I remember sitting in my room and hearing them discuss topics that I had felt, or I had questions about, or I had taken issue with, that I had not felt able to talk to my teachers and my parents about. And I'd felt alone in doing that. And I am one of millions of children who have felt that way across the country, across the world. When you're not sure whether what you're feeling makes you abnormal, subnormal, crazy, like you don't know. And realizing that actually when there's this platform and there's this community where it can be spoken about openly, honestly, thoroughly, you realize you're not alone. You get advice for where you may need to find help if you're struggling, say with your mental health, for example. Also practical advice. Maybe it's about careers, maybe it's about education. Whether it's something physical, like, I remember listening to a show, it was about STIs or like genital warts or something. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I can't believe they're speaking about this. But of course it should be open, because if we destigmatize conversations around these things, then we're all going to be healthier physically and mentally. And the fact that there is a show on Radio 1 that does that is such a special thing. It's such an important thing. And I just hope to be able to keep doing that, because that show was there for me, and I hope that now I can be there for other people.
Vic, it has been so great talking to you, and thank you very much for sharing your story with us, and for sharing some of the things that you've gone through, and also talking to us a bit about the stuff you're doing with Radio 1. It's amazing, and good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thanks
thank you so much, Hannah. And thank you so much. It was just lovely to speak to you as well. See you later.